It's me, Kardea Brown, and welcome to my home kitchen. I'm so glad you're here to join me. We are making slow cooked beef brisket, and brisket is the epitome of Southern comfort food. I like to make mine with a tangy, zing-zangy Carolina barbecue sauce. Let's get started. Let's add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to a hot Dutch oven. Okay. It should cover the bottom of your pot. What we're doing right now is searing or braising our beef before we get started. That helps unlock some of that flavors of the beef, okay? So that's there. Let's get started on my house seasoning. It goes perfectly with everything, okay? Equal parts, 1 teaspoon of sweet paprika, 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of onion powder. Okay. Give it a mix. Okay. Make sure your Dutch oven is up to medium-high heat. You need that to be nice and hot in order to get that sear. Let's take some of that house seasoning and rub it in on both sides. Okay. All right, and you should have 2 pounds of your beef brisket. Just rub again, creating a layer of seasoning. Flip it over and do the same thing to this side. Okay. I'm gonna place the brisket in, fat side down first. We're going to sear our brisket on each side for 5 to 7 minutes. While that's happening, let's go over and wash our hands. That already smells incredible, locking in some of the flavors of the brisket and the house seasoning. Right, let's get started on our onion. You should have 4 medium-sized yellow onion. We're just going to cut it in half. We'll cut off your ends first, then cut it in half. I'm going to slice these about a 1/2 inch thick. I love brisket, especially slow cooked brisket. I like smoked brisket as well. It's something that we always love going to like the barbecue joints to get, or my mom would make it on a Sunday afternoon. And if you get it from a barbecue joint, or if you do it at home, you gotta serve it up with a white slice of bread, and even better when it's cheap. You gotta sop up all that goodness. Right? My mom always say, ain't nothing like a piece of brisket and a cheap white slice of bread. Okay. Our onion is chopped. Let's flip our brisket over. Look at that. Beautiful, crispy, golden brown edges. Okay. Turn your heat down just a little. And don't worry if some of that stuff starts to get burnt and crispy looking on the bottom of your Dutch oven. You know why? Because that's where all the flavor is. Let's remove our brisket and put it on a plate and let that rest. To our Dutch oven, we're gonna add the onions. Okay, now look at what that brisket has developed at the bottom of your Dutch oven. Some brown bits, caramelized flavor. We're gonna break it up with this onion. and some white pale ale. And if you're making this for kids, you want to opt out on the alcohol, by all means. And if you want, you can also replace this with some apple cider. Yeah, we're breaking up all of that stuck on goodness from the bottom of your Dutch oven with the onions. Okay, we're gonna also add in 2 bay leaves. Okay, a sprinkle of salt, some pepper, and our pale ale. And the pale ale is gonna give this brisket a hoppy flavor. All right, we got a rolling boil here. Let's turn off our heat. I'm gonna turn my oven on, get it up to 300 degrees. Let's pop our brisket back into the Dutch oven. Okay. Get it nice and snugly in between those onions. Put the top on. Grab your mitts. We're gonna pop this in the oven that's preheated to 300 degrees for 3 hours. At 2.5 hours, we're gonna come back and make our barbecue sauce. So pause and meet me back then. All right, it's been 2.5 hours, and now we're gonna get started on our barbecue sauce. This is a Carolina barbecue sauce. It has a mustard base. It's really tangy because we're gonna add some apple cider vinegar, but it's also sweet because we're adding some brown sugar, so it has a little molasses kick to it, okay? And I also like to add a little onion and garlic for an extra layer of flavor, okay? We're dicing 1 red onion. And you don't have to dice it fine because we're gonna end up using the blender to get this smooth. Add it to a bowl. Okay. Dice your other half. Okay. Smash and chop 1 clove of garlic. You don't have to chop that fine because we're gonna put it in a blender anyway. I'm actually using a immersion blender. If you don't have one of those, just make sure your standing blender is ready. We have our pot here, it's hot. Let's add our onion and garlic. 2 cups of apple cider vinegar. Okay. A 1/2 cup of light brown sugar. You can use a heaping cup on this one. Okay. A 1/2 cup of spicy brown mustard. A 1/2 cup of whole grain mustard. And again, this is what makes it Carolina barbecue sauce, that brown sugar and mustard. And I like to use my own little spin on it by adding different types of mustard, the whole grain and the spicy mustard. I'm gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper for a little kick, 3 tablespoons of bourbon, and most of the alcohol will cook off, but if you prefer, you do not have to use the bourbon. Okay, give it a whisk. All right, so our sauce is boiling. We're gonna let it boil for 5 minutes. Once it boils for 5 minutes, we're gonna turn off the heat and blend our sauce. Once we blend it, we're gonna turn the heat up to a simmer and let it cook for 30 minutes. All right, so this has been boiling for 5 minutes. Let's turn our heat off. I'm using an immersion blender. If you do not have one of these at home, you can use a standard blender. We're just breaking down the onions and the garlic. And you'll notice that your sauce should start to thicken up. You want the onions and the garlic to be blended completely. I still see bits and pieces in mine, so I'm just gonna keep blending. All right, that looks good. If you use a standard blender, please put it back into your pot now. Let's turn our heat up to a simmer and let's cook this off for 30 minutes. Hit pause and meet me back here. All right, it's been a half hour. Let's take a cup of our Carolina barbecue sauce. Look how that has thickened up nicely. You know what? This will be a little easier. Let's use a cup of our Carolina barbecue sauce. All right, let's pour that 1 cup of barbecue sauce on top of our brisket. Rub it in there. Okay. Mix in some of that sauce. Mix it in a little bit with your onions. You can even put some of that onion on top. Okay. We're gonna let this go for another half an hour. Hit pause, and I'll meet you back here. All right, it's been a half hour. Our brisket is done. Let's pull it out. I know your house smells like my house does, and it smells delicious. All right. Ooh. Take it all in. Take it all in. Your brisket should be tender, super tender, where you can use 2 forks to shred it up. Let's see. Yeah. It should just fall apart. That's what slow cooked brisket should do. Are you drooling? I am. Mix some of those onions in there. We're gonna taste it together. Okay. And we want to also remove those bay leaves. If you see them, take them out. Okay, we put 2 in there. There's the other one. Let's take those out. Okay. Let's grab a plate. Let's build our sandwich. Take 2 slices of bread. Take some of that pulled brisket. Place it on the bottom layer of your bread. Oh yeah, is your stomach growling? Because mine is. Right? Get some of those extra onions out of there. Okay. I like a lot of onions. Okay. Add your onions on top, and last but not least, some more of that Carolina Gold barbecue sauce. Close it on up and cut it. Look at that juice spilling out. That's one juicy sandwich. That is tender. It is juicy, super flavorful. It has a little tang from that Carolina barbecue sauce. That's a Southern comfort food classic.